Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Lawmakers return to work in Washington today, where the gun debate is front and center. They face pressure following the deadly Florida high school shooting that killed 17 people. CBN's Jenna Browder is in Washington with this look at what's on the table.
Thousands of students returned for the first time to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Sunday, where a teen gunman opened fire, killing 17 of their classmates and staff members. A powerful visual and one of many to put pressure on lawmakers to take action. But right now, they have no clear direction.
It doesn't seem to make sense that you have to wait till you're 21 years old to get a pistol. But to get a gun like this maniac used in the school, you get that at 18. I mean, that doesn't make sense. And frankly, I explained that to the NRA.
President Trump is floating ideas, even signaling a willingness to break with the NRA on age restrictions and bump stocks. The NRA sharply pushing back against any calls to raise the age limit on an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle like the one the gunman used.
Let me just say the position is you do not want to raise the age.
That's what the NRA came out and said. That's correct.
One area the president and NRA appear to agree on is securing schools. Trump calling for some teachers to carry guns, saying it's up to the states, but he thinks it would work.
And if they had concealed permits, you wouldn't have this problem today.
Meantime, some Florida state legislators want Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel suspended. The state is launching an investigation into how local law enforcement responded to the shooting. The probe comes at the request of Governor Rick Scott after video shows at least one sheriff's deputy standing outside the school instead of running inside to engage the gunman. Here in Washington, some lawmakers, like Representative Steve Scalise, say those kinds of breakdowns and the fact that so many laws already on the books were not enforced shows that no magic bullet from Congress will stop another shooting from happening again. The most likely legislative option is bolstering the background check system for buying guns. But with so many competing ideas, it's hard to say what Washington will do. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
And here's a look at some of the other big headlines we're following for you right now in the CBN newsroom. Fighting continues in Syria despite the UN's best efforts to stop the modern-day massacre. The Security Council voted Saturday in favor of a 30-day ceasefire, but bombs and airstrikes continue. More than 500 people have died, most of them children. Millions are recovering from a series of tornadoes that stretch from the Midwest to the east. 12 twisters touched down Sunday night, destroying homes, toppling trees, and bringing with it heavy rain. 5 people have died. Hundreds lined the streets Saturday to watch a motorcade of the late Billy Graham. The procession went throughout his home state of North Carolina and ended at the Billy Graham Library in Charlotte. A viewing will be held at the library on Monday and Tuesday. Graham will be laid to rest on Friday. The White House announced President Trump does plan to attend the funeral. You can find out more about these stories throughout the day at cbnnews.com. America's embassy in Jerusalem will open in May, just in time for Israel's 70th anniversary celebration. The ambassador and a small staff will operate in the existing American consulate while a new permanent building is completed. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson signed off on the security plan last week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls this, quote, a great moment for the citizens of Israel and an historic moment for the state of Israel. He then called President Trump a great friend. The two men are scheduled to meet at the White House next week, which will be their 5th meeting since Trump became president. In a dramatic protest, Orthodox church leaders closed the doors of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over a municipal tax dispute Sunday. But some say the move was a ploy to gain international attention. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has more on this story.
The church leaders are angry over a decision to collect municipal property taxes from church-owned properties, excluding churches and houses of prayer.
The Jerusalem municipality issued scandalous collection notices and orders of seizure of church assets, properties, and bank accounts for alleged debts of punitive municipal taxes.
The municipality says the churches owe some $185 million in back taxes. Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus III said the city's move seemed like an attempt to weaken the Christian presence in Jerusalem.
The systematic campaign of abuse against churches and Christians reaches now its peak as a discriminatory and racist bill that target solely the properties of the Christian community in the Holy Land. This reminds us all of laws of a similar nature which were enacted against the Jews during the dark periods in Europe.
Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat disagreed. In Jerusalem, all are equal under the law, Christians, Muslims, and Jews alike. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, as is the case for all of Jerusalem's churches, synagogues, and mosques, is exempt from municipal taxes. There is absolutely no change in this regard. Commercial buildings such as hotels, places of commerce, and office space, however, are not exempt from municipal taxes, regardless of their ownership. The Haifa and Tel Aviv municipalities collect municipal taxes from commercial church assets. Jerusalem City Council member Flor Hassan Nahum said the uproar isn't about persecution, it's about money.
We see this as a very cynical move from the church, where we're talking about something affecting their pockets and nothing else, and them wanting to turn this into a religious conflict using terms like persecution. Jerusalem is the only city in the Middle East where there is true freedom of religion and true freedom of worship.
The disagreement actually mixes two issues: the municipal taxes and pending legislation regarding lands already sold by the churches.
My legislation discusses land that was sold to private owners, and it was sold actually not very high sum from the churches, by the churches, and these private owners now are going to people that live in apartments and saying, if you don't pay us 500,000 shekels, you lose your apartment.
In Israel, almost all of the land belongs to the state, which leases it to builders. So even homeowners don't own the land. One exception is the Orthodox Church, which purchased lands for agriculture 200 years ago, long before the state. Now those areas are in central Jerusalem. Knesset member Raquel Azaria is sponsoring the new legislation. She told CBN News it aims to buy back the land the church has sold.
It has nothing to do with any of the lands that are owned by the churches. And unfortunately, they got very nervous about it and very worked up. And now we're working with them to lower the flames and to make it clear what the real story is.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Coming up, escaping North Korea, here defectors from the country tell their stories of fleeing the oppressive regime. We've got it next. Despite the kind and peaceful face North Korea presented at the Winter Olympics, many North Koreans defectors tell stories of a dark and oppressive regime. Our Asia correspondent Lucille Toulousan sat down with two North Koreans who fled the country to escape death.
For security reasons, we shall conceal their identities and call them Jae-un and Sung-min, both North Korean defectors. Jae-un is the lone survivor in a family of 5 siblings. Her father was taken to a labor camp in North Korea when she was 2 years old. He was never heard of again. During the Great Famine in the mid-1990s, her only brother died of malnutrition. Her mother died on the road while trying to find food to bring back to her starving family.
When my mother died, we did not have the strength to bury her. My older sister went to China to earn a living for the family. She sent money once to buy rice, but I never heard of her after that. I learned that she was sold as a slave. My older sister engaged in smuggling, got caught, and was sent to a labor camp where she also died.
Out of desperation, Jae-un decided to escape from North Korea.
One night in December of 1999, I crossed the Yalu River and swam for the Chinese border. The water was freezing and the current was so strong, but I was determined to survive. After arriving in China, I chose to be sold to a man so I could live in the big city. But I ran away from him because he did not treat me well.
It was then that Jae-un joined a Bible study group in China. She remembered the woman she met prior to her escape, who spoke to her about God.
She told me that God is alive and is with me since He is the father to the fatherless and the defender of the widows. I had heard of God in North Korea, but I was also aware that believers are taken to prison. I was able to make a phone call to my only surviving sister in North Korea, and I told her about Jesus Christ and that God will help her through the harsh times. She accepted Christ as Savior. However, officials discovered that we were communicating, and so they took my sister to a labor camp. And since then, I never heard of her again.
Jae-un married a North Korean man she met in church, and they eventually moved to South Korea. Unlike Jae-un, who lived in poverty, Sung-min was well off and a college graduate in North Korea. But he says he was disenchanted with his country and decided to leave.
I knew that the Kim regime was enjoying a luxurious life while so many people were starving to death. In January 2007, I crossed the Tumen River into China. However, the South Korean family I met there didn't welcome me because I was not part of their family. The border guards told me to go to a church where I can get help, but I refused because I was an atheist. I hid in an apartment in China and started to find ways to commit suicide. In June 2007, a Chinese man I got to know during the river crossing brought a preacher to me. He said he understood my hardships, and Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. When I heard it, I felt something heavy in my heart. It was the first time in my life that I had such feelings. I thought I was nothing, but Jesus died on the cross to give me eternal life. I cried, knelt down, and prayed with him.
Behind me is the railroad track that takes tourists to the boundary of North Korea. North Korean defectors continue to hope that one day they will be able to cross over to the other side to be reunited with their loved ones. Sung-min believes 60,000 North Koreans have defected, but half of them decided to return to North Korea.
They have gone back to minister to their families. There are about 30,000 of them who belong to the underground churches in North Korea.
Today, Jae-un and Sung-min run a Christian radio program in South Korea that features North Koreans transformed by Christ. The program also promotes unity among North and South Koreans in preparation for reunification.
I believe God has a plan for us and will reunite Korea in His time and in His way. Our program aims to embrace the differences and restore common identity of the people of two Koreas.
Even though my life was extremely harsh, God chose me as His child, and it is Him who brought me here. So I will praise His name and spread the gospel of Jesus Christ until the very end of my life.
Lucille Talusen, CBN News, Seoul.
A new sheriff in town at the Environmental Protection Agency still ahead. Scott Pruitt talks about his role as the head of the EPA. Next. A growing attention to environmental issues and the question of climate change makes Scott Pruitt's job more important by the day. President Trump chose him to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. And our David Brody shows us he is a man on a mission with a servant's heart.
Scott Pruitt is the kind of guy you might meet in Bible study.
And that's the gospel truth.
The former Sunday school teacher and church deacon wants to use that faith background in his role as EPA administrator.
As I serve and as we seek to make decisions, I want to do so based upon an attitude that we're here to minister to people, serve people, and have a light and a cheerfulness as we do it.
Some of his moves have definitely put smiles on the faces of conservatives. Pruitt believes the Obama administration meddled in Americans' livelihoods and went too far with unnecessary regulations and executive orders.
Actions taken by the executive branch really were actions that the legislative branch should have been taking or addressing, and it did what? It impacted liberty. I mean, when you declare a war on coal from a regulatory perspective, the question has to be asked, where's that in the statute? Where did Congress empower the EPA to declare a war on coal? There's a role for the EPA. Yeah. There's a very important role for the agency. The problem is the last several years, that role has been morphed and evolved into something that's not.
So Pruitt is clearly making his mark at the agency. He played major roles in the U.S. leaving the Paris climate deal and ending Obama's Clean Power Plan. It sought to curb emissions from coal-fired plants. And Pruitt says that unfairly attempted to pick winners and losers on electricity. He also wants to cut bureaucratic red tape. One stated victory, more timely action on nuclear waste sites near people's homes.
Well, how do you have some of these sites take 30 to 40 years to get remediated, to cleaned up, or in some cases, just a decision made on how to clean up?
Government red tape?
That's unacceptable.
But I'm feeling really scared.
Not everyone's cheering. Environmental activists see Pruitt as an administrator who's not a good steward of nature.
The environmental left tells us that though we have natural resources like natural gas and oil and coal, and though we can feed the world, we should do what? Keep those things in the ground, put up fences, and be about prohibition. That's wrong-headed, and I think it's counter to what we should be about.
Pruitt believes God commands us to take care of the environment, and that also means to use what He has provided.
The biblical worldview with respect to these issues is that we have a responsibility to manage and cultivate, harvest the natural resources that we've been blessed with, to truly bless our fellow mankind.
As for climate change or global warming, the environmental left labels Pruitt a science denier.
Truly, I mean, and clearly, the climate changes. There's no, for someone to say that someone's a skeptic or a climate denier about the climate changing, that's just nonsensical. I mean, we see that throughout history. We impact the climate by our activity. How much so is very difficult to determine with respect to our CO2 or carbon footprint, but we obviously do. But here's the key. We as a country have reduced our carbon footprint by almost 20%. From the year 2000 to 2014. You know how? Through innovation and technology, not government mandate.
Pruitt is also under criticism because he's flying in business or first class, not coach. The EPA says he needs that extra layer of privacy because he is being confronted angrily in public. Recently, Pruitt canceled a trip to Israel over the controversy. Meanwhile, the president is sticking by him. Because in Pruitt, he gets a man who says his overall philosophy is less government control. And it's why Pruitt went into politics a while back. And God was at the center of that conversation.
I spent a couple years just earnestly praying through, asking the question that I don't think we ask enough as individuals. God, what do you want to do with me? Really getting in our prayer closets, seeking His heart, asking what He wants to do in our lives. It was actually Isaiah chapter 1 that I was reading through at that time that really spoke to my heart, and specifically in the latter part of chapter 1, where God says to Israel, I will restore your leaders as in the days of old, your judges as at the beginning. And there was just a desire that welled up inside of me to say I wanted to be like those leaders that we had at the founding, at the inception of our country.
And to Pruitt, the need to pursue what the Founding Fathers intended is more important than ever.
There's never been more of a threat to liberty, to what we know is the protections that are inherent in our Constitution than what we live today.
Another reason that Pruitt would remind critics that the Constitution reads we the people, not we the government. David Brody, CBN News.
And we thank David Brody for the introduction to the man at the helm of the EPA. Stay with us. We'll be right back. He's a 3-time Grammy Award winner, and he's been writing and performing Christian music for more than 30 years. And this week, Michael W. Smith is releasing a new live worship album. CBN's Ben Kennedy sat down with him to talk about the project.
Michael W. Smith. For decades, he's topped both Christian and pop music charts. But his latest album shares a more personal side that we've not seen before. A Million Lights is the name of Michael W. Smith's latest album, a project which almost didn't happen.
I honestly didn't think I was going to actually do a record because I was still grieving the passing of my dad, who I was extremely close to.
Michael's dad was a major influence in his life. In fact, he often called his father his biggest fan.
My dad was my hero. He just taught me so much about life.
That inspiration led Michael to begin writing again.
One day the floodgates opened up and I couldn't hit record fast enough. I think every songwriter goes through the time where, oh my gosh, I've dried up and I got to go get another job. And that happened to me a little bit, going, well, it's been a great run. And then one day I wrote A Million Lights.
The multi-platinum artist didn't stop there. For the first time in his career, Michael plans to release back-to-back projects.
I went to my management going, I think I have a wild idea. I think I'm supposed to do this pop record, but I think I'm supposed to do a worship record too, and release them back-to-back weeks.
A new live worship album will debut only a week after his studio recording. A Million Lights. What does it mean?
A Million Lights came from my fascination with space. I want to be an astronaut.
And turns out he got to live out his dream in this song's music video.
It's like a dream come true, you know, because you really actually feel like you did go into space.
What was it like to work with your son, Ryan? He directed the video.
He directed the video. He's talented. He always has been. You know, I just remember watching him with a little handy cam sort of video recorder when he was 8, 9, 10 years old and making movies all grown up. And I'm thinking that guy's going to be a filmmaker one day. So it's just great to work with your kids.
And it's the younger generation that Michael wanted to reach with his new music. His goal? To take on the divisive national sentiment and mean-spirited social media by promoting love and respect for differing points of view. At age 15, you knew you wanted to be a musician. What is your advice to this generation?
It's not about you, and there's a bigger play here. I don't think you're here by mistake. I think God has a call in your life, and I think He's crazy about you. And there's a destiny on your life.
That destiny led Michael to become a top Christian artist. A member of the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, Michael has also taken home 3 Grammys, 45 Dove Awards, and continues to inspire fans worldwide. First album was back in 1983. 30 years later, we have Go West Young Man, Place in This World, now A Million Lights. People are wondering, what is the key behind your success?
Well, I think it's a God thing, ultimately. I mean, this is what I'm made for, and why I've gotten to do it this long, I'll ask God one day, you know, when I see Him. I think maybe a practical answer is that I still love what I do.
Michael is about to kick off a world tour, including his first ever performance in Israel, which is fitting since Michael says it was a visit to the Holy Land years ago that transformed his faith. The tour will then return to right here in the U.S. for concerts across the country. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
And I'll leave you with this Monday motivation. There's only one human who walked this earth in utter perfection. His name is Jesus. And because He did it, perfection is not the price you pay for blessings. It is the grace of God. You can't buy it, sell it, or bottle it. He freely gives it away. With that word, be sure to make this a marvelous Monday. And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We'll see you right back here come tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.